This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Jason Todd of Thinker Ventures. Jason, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. So what was your background before investing and working with early stage companies?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur for quite some time, having spent a bit of time in sales and marketing and then getting into some technology spaces. I'm a self-taught programmer. And then once upon a time, I started an e-commerce company. We sold residential heating and air conditioning equipment online to consumers, which was revolutionary back in 2002. We grew that up to about 7 or 8 distribution centers, a national network of 30,000 contractors, and then also a distribution HVAC distributorship and I sold my interest in that in 2011, retired for a little bit, and then started Thinker.
Great. So what excites you right now?
Well, personally, and I think that's important to recognize, personally what excites me are, and I know, granted this is vague, but are people who have ideas. They can see where they're at, kind of point A. They can see and articulate what point B looks like, and they're willing to work with others to get there. And the reason it's kind of vague and exciting to me all at the same time is that a lot of times in startups, what I've noticed is that people can't articulate point B. They don't have a good grasp of point A, and they are pretty sure that in their wandering, they've got it all figured out. And that doesn't excite me at all. And so I kind of shun that. But we're kind of open at this point in time for people who've got great ideas and can articulate where they're going and want to work with others to figure it out.
Well, great. So what's your advice for people investing in startups? What do you advise them to do before they write that first check?
Oh, man. Well, people who are investing in startups, is that what your question is?
That's correct. The investor side of it.
Yeah. So I think that people need to know a bit about the space that they're going to get involved in. I know that one thing I've been bad at in the past is sharing the excitement with the entrepreneur and getting wrapped up in that and really having no clear grasp of the space that the entrepreneur wants to operate in, and then getting wrapped up in the excitement, because being an entrepreneur and investing with entrepreneurs is exciting, but excitement at the end of the day doesn't mean anything if you don't have a solid business plan.
Great. And then on the other side of the table, for those who are starting businesses, what do you coach them to do before they launch that startup?
Market validation. I think that it's important to talk to the people who don't love you, because there's 2 types of people, I say, who are going to do business with you. There are the people who love you and the people who are not yet sure they should love you. And all too often, I think entrepreneurs get in the trap of running their concepts by people who love them. But the people who love you, by and large, are lying to you. They don't mean to, but they are. And that is proven by shows on TV that are built on singers who mama should have told him years ago, you're not a singer, dude. Maybe a producer, but never a singer, before you get on national TV. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs end up that way. I got a great idea. All my friends and family agree, and wisdom be damned, I'm going to move ahead. So what I recommend is get to the people who don't love you and have no vested interest in your success. And they will begin to tell you the truth. And if you make it a comfortable space for them to tell you the truth, you can learn a lot. And if your idea doesn't change, having talked to 30, 50, 100 of those people who don't love you yet, if your idea doesn't change, you're on the wrong path, because your idea should change once it hits the marketplace. And you better do that before you invest a lot of your own time and effort, and much less anybody else's money in it.
Yeah, a little tough love early on can save everybody a whole lot of time.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the state of the startup world. How is the industry evolving? What changes do you see out there happening today?
Well, we are in the Midwest, and by choice, for sure, and somewhat by default. And the Midwest is sort of has been a challenging startup space, particularly since we're outside of some of the larger metro centers like Chicago and Milwaukee. So our challenge is finding entrepreneurs who have good ideas and want to do something here. And a lot of the kind of the sexiness of startups on the coasts and other places outside of the Midwest, people get lost in that and they want to not operate here in the Midwest. But one thing that's important to us is that is that you stay kind of local or regional. And that, I think, doesn't mean you shouldn't have a world of opportunity. But I think for one of our things is we want to be close to you. And that means you got to stay here. So we have kind of a void or a vacuum of opportunity here that is significant enough and exciting enough with a good enough business plan behind it, good enough people behind it to get a high volume of quality businesses coming through. So that's a challenge with us. It's something that we see it might be unique to us. I also think that there is a lot of hype around certain sectors, or people using words that they don't mean. And what I mean by that is we looked at a company and we're kind of advising from the outside a little bit with this organization who was going to work with sales teams and do some data analysis on identifying their sales that or opportunities that might be at risk, or identifying the best opportunities from your CRM. And they said, well, we have this machine learning thing. And he kept on saying machine learning and then AI. And I've got a tech background, and I told him, you got to stop saying machine learning, dude, because none of this is machine learning. You have an algorithm. That's not learning. That's not machine learning. It's not AI. So back off of it, because as soon as you hit my door, you're dead, because I know that you're trying to snow me. And if you're going to snow me at the front, you're definitely going to try to snow me in the middle and the back. And I want no part of it. So he learned from that, but he was just caught up in the hype. And so that's one of the things that I see in startups. And there's an ebb and flow to that. There's just hype around certain sectors and people move in and out of them who they're just saying things that aren't true and trying to get money for that.
So let's talk about your investment thesis. What startups do you work for or look for to work with? And what's your criteria for working with those startups? You mentioned they've got to be straight up with you, but what else do you look for?
Well, again, this is kind of broad for us, and necessarily so, I think, because just the place that we're located and the types of ideas, the organizations that we work with. Again, I go back to this idea, you got to be the right person with the right idea at the right time with the right team. What I see and who we want to work with are, again, the people who they can see where they're at point A, or they accept input to understand point A, and they can clearly articulate that. And then they have a clear vision for what point B looks like. And then they want to work with others to move their organizations in that direction. And if they're unwilling to do that, then it's just not something that we're going to look at. So the thesis in general is you got to meet those criteria. And beyond that, we will perhaps advise your organization. So today I talked with a guy he's got an interesting concept of storing information about people who pass on, and then being able to retell those stories to family and friends and around grave sites. And it's a neat concept. And I try not to give too much away on what he's talking about, but it's a neat concept. But the cool thing about him as an individual is that he's got some experience already to know that he doesn't hold all the answers. And he took the initial feedback that we gave him, and he validated our feedback against other people and found, yeah, I shouldn't be headed in this direction. This point B is just not going to be something that's workable. And then he reached out to a network of people for advice. Again, those people who don't love him yet. And he took their information, he took their feedback under advisement. That, I think, is a huge part of our thesis, certainly my thesis, because again, if you think you got it all figured out, you're wrong. And so I really just caution, and part of my thesis is if I tell you you're wrong, you just don't know in what ways and to what extent. If you take that information, you're like, yeah, that's probably true. I probably am wrong. Doesn't mean you're not right about all sorts of things. You can be right about all sorts of things, but you got to accept that you're already wrong in some way. If you can accept that, again, you're kind of in our, if we want to talk about thesis, you're in our range. Outside of that, though, boy, we've started electrical contracting companies. We've started tech companies. We've worked with and advised and held equity positions with people who have kind of a tech back end on a very tangible, feet on the ground volunteering opportunity. So we're kind of all over the board, but to us, ultimately, it's about the team. We also, I guess, we wanted to look at the scale of the opportunity. It has to be something that's going to scale probably nationally or regionally. We get people in our door. Again, this might just be virtue of where we're at. We just get people who have tiny little opportunities and Main Street businesses. And it's just not the scale of that. The concept is just not something we can touch. even though so we might be an advisor, but we're not gonna get beyond that.
So can you talk about one or two portfolio companies that fit that thesis and worked in that way?
Yeah, we worked with a electrical contracting company for a couple of years. We helped start them. They had a real niche where the electrical company in our area, electric utility in our area, was offering rebates for lighting retrofits. And it's not sexy, but it turned cash, and we expected it to turn a lot of cash in two to 3 years, and then those rebates would get significantly reduced. Now, the why we chose to work with that and fund it and work in it for a period of time was that the scale of the opportunity was, it's kind of one of those flash in the pan. Like, you had a lot of opportunity for a short period of time, and whoever could scale fast enough or faster than everybody else could get more of the opportunities. And so instead of a tiny electrical contracting company taking on these opportunities, we just scaled this sucker and then got big contracts and then exited that. And so that was by design. It wasn't something that's going to go public and we're all going to walk away with hundreds of millions of dollars. Or that just wasn't the scale of the opportunity. But regionally, it was a sure fit in terms of the criteria, and it had a good timeline on it. So it was just an interesting thing that people don't, maybe it's outside the realm of what the sexiness is around startups and venture capital, private equity.
Great. Well, let's talk about challenges for the startup. Aside from fundraising, what do you think are the top one or two challenges you see most startups having to deal with in launching their business?
I'm not certain that fundraising is that complicated. I tell people that the money is one of the most ubiquitous commodities in the world. You can come across money. Your challenge to get to money is a good story. And many times people just don't have a compelling story, and they just don't see that. They don't believe it. And what I mean by that is, some people, when they're talking about the size of the market, they use bogus numbers to get people excited. And I think that works, but at the end of the day, like that's not something you can bank on. You got to come in with some better research and maybe treat it more conservatively. So I think that people entrepreneurs many times get caught up in the excitement and believe that just because they think it's a great idea, everybody else should think it's a great idea too, and then throw numbers at it that don't make any sense. And then when you advise them, say, hey, you can't do that, then they don't take that. We met with an entrepreneur the other day, last week, in fact, who's got a neat idea about fighting fires and a new way to aim. Well, actually, yeah, a new way to drop water onto wildfires. And he cares about it because his brother is in California and they have fires. But I said, well, he started off his speech saying, hey, well, last time I presented this, the guy says, I didn't move on in this presentation because the guy said I didn't have any good numbers behind it. And then he proceeded to basically tell us why that's okay. And I met with him afterwards, after he's presented us. I was like, dude, you should have taken that. You should have taken that and run with it, because what am I going to do with this? You said your story was, well, isn't the best thing in the world to save a life? Okay, true, fine, maybe. How many lives? At what cost? I don't know, and you don't know either. I said, have you ever fought a wildfire? No. Have you ever talked to anybody who has? No. Then how do you know your idea is even worth it? Like you've not even talked to anybody. Well, but it's a neat idea. Yeah, it's a neat idea. Everybody's got neat ideas. Like, take me out for drinks. I got 50 of them, but none of them are valuable. So I think that the idea of being an entrepreneur, many times people think, I'm an inventor, I'm an entrepreneur, and they just fall in love with their own idea. And again, don't treat it like, and here's something else I told somebody recently. I said, guys, are you willing to work on this idea for the next 2 years in your spare time, but like a full-time job, making no money at this, with no sure concept at the end that you're going to get anything for this? You're going to throw away those 2 years of full-time work between your other full-time jobs. Are you so sure of this concept with the information that you have that you would do all that? If the answer is no, then why the hell would I do it? Why would I put any money behind you? I'm not going to do that. So, and all too often, just people turn away from that. And they're like, well, but my sweat equity and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's worthless. You got to really look at this hard. You judge yourself, because the market's you might as well judge yourself early on and and kind of be wise to these facts. But all too often people just don't listen, and they're so stuck on, hey, I've got this idea, I love it, my family and friends love it, therefore everybody else can love it. And then they think that everybody's got money is somehow stupid, and they're not. They are beating this thing up in their brains. And if you find somebody who's not, caution. So I see that kind of stuff at play in entrepreneurs all the time.
Great. Well, you see a lot of different applications and sectors out there. If you had to pick one or two that are good immediate opportunities for investors to pursue, what would you call out?
Well, I'm going to kind of go towards the AI type of stuff on the horizon. I think, and this kind of goes against a little bit of what I said earlier, that there's a lot of people who are trying to get involved in that type of stuff, but they don't have a clear understanding of even what AI is. They're just taglining it. Artificial intelligence and the applicability behind that is going to change the world in amazing ways. I started playing around with artificial intelligence back when I was in, oh my God, it might have been like 7th grade or some goofball like that. I came across this great book and some software examples behind flocking birds and how you could treat each of these things as little objects, and they could make intelligent decisions on their own, and then they could learn stuff, and the Liza way back in the day. And I built some prototype stuff because I was a nerd and wasn't out playing basketball. I was in my basement programming. And so that kind of stuff excites me. And I recognize the power of all of that, and the applicability of this is going to be huge. But I also caution against that, and with the idea that there's a lot of people trying to enter that and taglining AI, and they just don't have something that's workable. So from both from one end, the entrepreneur's end, make sure you have a really good understanding of what you mean when you say AI, and then from the investor end, just recognize that just because a person's using the right words doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about, and make sure that you really have a good, solid understanding. Go get some other experts in that space, and I guess Ray Dalio in his book Principles talks about that you're after the best answer, not the best answer you can come up with. So I guess from the investor end, make sure that you find the best answer and really get your own advisors together before you give them any cash.
Well, that's good advice. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Oh boy. I don't know, man. Investing in companies is not for the faint of heart. And Lord knows I've made some mistakes on that, and then also had some good successes. So I think entrepreneurs just heed the wisdom of, you're already wrong. You just don't know in what ways and to what extent. And if you operate from that, go find somebody to bounce your ideas off of and look for the best answer, not the best answer you can come up with.
Well, that's good advice as well. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
You can email me, jason@thinkerventures.com. And that's probably the best way to get us. You can find our organization at thinkerventures.com. We've got tech resources. We've got some design resources, but where we really excel is with strategy. And boy, I've lived the life, feels like many lifetimes over. So I've seen it from both ends, and it's our joy really to be able to pass on those experiences and see other people just run with it and do a great job.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us today, and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.